Well, welcome everyone. Let's go ahead and get started. A few folks are chiming in. As we noted, please feel free to introduce yourself, your organization, where you're dialing in from in the chat screen. My name is Andy Leider. I'm a managing director with Potrero Group. Um, Potrero Group is an organization that is focused on leadership consulting for nonprofit and social change organizations. A big piece of that is working with the people in organizations. So our webinar today, titled Under Pressure, Managing Stress in Organizations and Teams. A big piece of what we do is work with organizations and the humans, the people who are a part of those organizations in stressful times of change, transition, renewal, and consideration. And a big piece of what we'll be talking about today are some tips and tactics, some perspectives on how to work with organizations, with yourself during stressful times. We will hold some time at the end for question and answer. Also, as we go forward, please feel free to include questions that you have in the chat. Um, we are recording this meeting for those who can't join us today. We encourage you to please mute yourselves and make sure that we don't pick up any background noise. I will try to keep my dogs and my family in the other room as we go forward in this conversation. As I mentioned, Potrero Group works with many organizations on an annual basis. We provide planning services, board and executive recruitment and search. We do organizational development and we do coaching work. My own personal background, I was raised in Minneapolis. I lived for many, many years in the San Francisco Bay Area. I now reside in Bozeman, Montana. Part of what brings me to this conversation is about 20 years ago, which feels like 100 years ago. I went through an executive coaching program with the Strozzi Institute. The Strozzi Institute is one of the premier places in the world for somatics for organizations and individuals. Somatics is working with systems and people through the body, recognizing that we are all a part of different systems socially, organizationally, but that we all live and inhabit bodies, and those systems, organizations, and the external world impact who we are in many different ways. The physical realm is one of those. So much of what you'll be hearing me talk about today comes out of that discipline, and happy to talk more about that if there are questions as we get into it. I have been with Potrero Group for about 13 years, and a big piece of what keeps me here is the opportunity to interact with so many of you, so many people who are doing great work in the world. As we say, part of what Potrero Group is here for is to help change makers who are making a difference in the world through their work and their lives. So thank you for being here and for being a part of this. I want to start today by just really acknowledging that stress is normal. Like anything, too much is bad, but so is too little. Stress is really something that is a part of our daily lives. I think stress is something that gets a bad rap. We talk about I'm stressed out. I have too much stress. I'm overburdened. I'm overworked. A lot of different things fall into that bucket of stress. But stress is also a part of change. Stress is what creates new things, that creates systems change, that creates the opportunity for us as people to change, to look at things that maybe are working, that aren't working, and say, where do I have too much? Where do I have too little? And how do I continue to evolve as a person? The goal for this presentation, but also for the work that Potrero does, I'd encourage the work that you do, is not to be stress-free. Stress is a necessary part of life. The goal is to not let stress take over, to not have so much that it's all you do, it's all you think about. And a big piece of what we're going to talk about in the next 45 minutes or so is different tactics, different ways of not allowing stress to take over, but being able to step into it, to acknowledge it, to maintain choice, to maintain the ability to work with the stresses that come, and to really acknowledge that a big piece of what happens in our lives are things that we don't have control over. But what we do have choice and control over is how we interact with those things, how we respond, how we remember that the choice is ours to create the worlds that we are a part of. So what exactly is stress? There are, when you Google or Chat GP, what is stress, you will get a list of thousands of pages, many, many paragraphs summarized by an AI somewhere. For our purposes today, I really think about stress as an emotional or systemic reaction to pressure. That pressure can be physical, it can be psychological, it can be emotional, it can be internal, or it can be external. And that's a big thing to think about. There's stress that we put on ourselves, and there's stress that is put on us by the world that we interact with. That could be the professional world, it could be the political world, it could be the everything from the weather to the news cycle to our families to the situations that we find ourselves in. We also put tremendous stress on ourselves. The expectations we have for ourselves, the way that we hold ourselves accountable to things, the things that we think are successful, the things that we think are failures. All of that creates and provides opportunities for stress to impact us in ways that we hope to have choice of, but sometimes that's a difficult thing. Think about two different types of stress and the ways that these impact yourself and your organization. And you'll hear me throughout the course of the day talk about personal and organizational a little bit interchangeably. And I'm trusting and relying on you to tease out some of the nuances and differences. But think about two kinds of stress. One is acute stress. Something happens immediately. I get a piece of feedback. I get a phone call that something's happened to a family member. Something comes up in the course of my work and I react to it. That's acute, it's immediate. Maybe it lasts for an hour, a day, a week, but it's something that is different from chronic stress, which is something that is a sustained reaction that has become a pattern or a habit in your life. Something that happens over and over again. It could be historical from family or community growing up. It could be from a chronic pattern of work and the way that you've interacted or an organization has interacted where the response to stress has become a habit. Maybe you don't even recognize that that's your response. But there are two different ways to think about both of those. One is what is so acute and how do I react to that and where are my points of choice? The second being something that's so chronic that I don't even necessarily recognize that it's happening. It's a habit, it's ingrained. I want to really call out right here at the start that you make a difference in your organization, in your life, in your family, your community, that you matter. Whatever, as you show up as a leader, whatever context that's in, your personal approach to stress, your ability to maintain focus and control, and really choice and compassion are where we'll focus a lot today. They make an outsized difference. The header for um, this session was about managing stress in organizations and teams. You as a leader, whether that's leading from the top in a hierarchical sense, or you leading from wherever you find yourself within that organization or system, um, how you do that is a huge piece of leadership. Your ability to manage things coming at you, your own responses, the responses of others. That's a key to leadership, whether you find yourself in a CEO role, whether you find yourself in an assistant or somewhere in between, or frankly, whether you're leading a family or leading a sports team or leading something within your community. All of those are opportunities for leadership where you can maintain choice and compassion through how you interact with the things that are coming at you. However, you are seldom have the opportunity or will succeed at controlling the inputs that come at you. So we think about how do I live stress free? How do I manage stress? When we say how do we manage stress, that's about how do we manage your response and your reaction? Because I would posit that you will never get away from managing all the stresses in the world that are going to come at you. It's too big, it's too much. You are not going to be able to manage all of the different pieces that cause stress in your life, whether that's over the long period of time in a chronic sense or those acute things that happen on a day-to-day basis. That doesn't mean that we don't think about that or we don't feel like we can. It just means that to control the environment in which you interact with the inputs that you and others receive is really what we talk about when we talk about stress management. How do you manage your own interactions? How do you manage the things that come at you because you're not going to be able to turn off that spigot? As we've seen, the pressure, the fire hose of information, of connections, the focus on hijacking or demanding your attention is only ramping up. It's only getting bigger, and it's only getting more complex and nuanced and sophisticated as time evolves. And so your ability to turn off that spigot is there a little bit. You can silence your notifications. You can close apps. You can turn off digital devices. You can do things that allow you to make a difference in the situations that you're a part of through choice. But sometimes that's going to take managing the external world and managing the internal world in balance. I'd like to introduce the concept of conditioned tendencies. This comes out of my own school work. It comes very much out of the work of the Strozzi Institute, a gentleman named Richard Strozzi Heckler, who was one of my teachers for many years. They're based in Petaluma up in the North Bay of San Francisco. Conditioned tendencies are, if you kind of pick apart those two words, conditioned, something we've been, has been made habitual, something that we've been conditioned to do, to see, to understand. It's something that we've done over and over again. And it's a way that we have come to see and understand the world. And then tendencies are just our reactions, the things that we tend to do under certain conditions. So your conditioned tendencies are what you practice being. Whether we know it or not, we are always practicing something. If you are someone who sits on the couch and eats 4 bags of Doritos and watches a Netflix show from start to end, and you do that every day, your physical body, your mental well-being, all of that will be perfectly attuned to doing that. If you are a marathon runner and every day you're out there pounding the pavement, doing your miles, doing the weight training, the things that go into being a marathon runner, your physical body, your mental outlook, the tendencies, the way you respond to things will be perfectly attuned to somebody who does a lot of that. Now, there's no value or moral judgment on being one or the other. It's just to recognize in ourselves what are the things that we're practicing being without recognizing that we are practicing being them. Sometimes it's very intentional, sometimes we don't recognize. The cool part, though, is that practice equals choice, and choice is about change. So when you think about managing stresses, managing the inputs coming in, and your response to them, recognize that you have choice. When something comes at you, I get an email that triggers me a little bit. I kind of feel a certain way. That is a conditioned tendency to respond to a negative input in a certain way. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But when under stress, we respond as we have practiced responding. It's like breathing. It's a sympathetic response. You don't really have to think about it. Something happens and you respond because that is how you have trained yourself to respond, whether you recognized it or not. Personally, I think an incredibly hopeful part of this, an incredibly hopeful a part of living in a relatively stressful world, working in stressful organizations, is that you can break those tendencies and you can condition yourself and your organization to choose new responses. And that to me is something that when I think about things that work at Potrero Group, when I think about things that work in my family, I think, what am I doing that's causing that to happen? And the flip side of that, when I think about things that aren't working, maybe breakdowns that have happened, ways that we operate as a company that maybe don't work as well as they could, I think about what are the things that we do, what are the habits that we have that cause those things to happen. And I start to unpeel, where are we practicing being successful? Where are we practicing what we want? And where are we blind to maybe things that we're practicing that are producing change or producing things that we don't want to see happen? So thinking about your conditioned tendencies is an important underlying factor in much of managing and working with stressful situations. So up at the top on the cover page to this, I encourage you to grab a pen and a piece of paper. You can do that on a notebook, physical paper. There's something for me personally about the act of writing that triggers thoughts and a different kind of physical sensation. But I'm curious what causes you personal stress. Um, and just to start a little bit in on your notebook, writing down what some of those stressors are. And I want to talk a little bit about the fact, and I've talked a bit about this, that stress lives in our bodies. And so where do you hold that stress the most? When we think about stress impacting us, impact is two things colliding. So, where does stress live in your body? Where is it impacting your physical body? So, I'd encourage you just for a moment, if you wouldn't mind, to do a quick exercise with me. Um, if you're standing or sitting, just kind of relax your body, take a couple deep breaths, kind of let that curiosity about where this is all going slip away, and just think about your feet. Wiggle your toes a little bit. Recognize that your body has an end on the ground. Gravity's pulling you down. You're connected through your feet. You maybe, if you're in a chair, also connected through your backside a little bit. So wiggle your legs, feel where they're connecting with your feet or where they're connecting with the chair that you're sitting in. Relax consciously your shoulders. Shoulders are a huge place where people hold stress. So that may mean just kind of putting your hands on the desk, putting them in your lap, consciously relaxing your shoulders. That's not about maintaining a military posture. It's not about having squared shoulders or being a particular kind of shape. It's really about saying, right now, I'm recognizing my shoulders. I'm thinking about them. I move them around a little bit, and then I let them just settle into wherever they're going to be. And then the last one I want you to do is move your neck a little, sorry, two more. Last one is just move your neck back and forth and let it come to a natural resting position where you're looking at the screen. So you're not kind of looking askance, you're not looking up or down. Just kind of relax and find that balance point where your head is over your neck is over your body. And then the last one that I've always found the most interesting is to close your eyes and picture putting a warm washcloth over your eyes, and if you can, picture putting a warm washcloth behind your eyes. So feel your eyes, move them around a little bit. Feel that warm washcloth, the sensation of it drooping over your eyes and relaxing the back of your eyes. So as you come back into our conversation today, really recognize where in your body does it feel like you hold stress. Feel free to drop something in chat if you'd like, if you have a quick thought. But think about your jaw, your eyes, your belly, your shoulders, your low back. Are there places in your physical body where you hold chronic stress? Maybe that you already know about. There are common areas, and there are some not so common areas. The pelvic region is a place people don't necessarily think about holding a lot of stress, but especially for women, a lot of stress is held in your pelvis, in the middle of your body. There's shoulders, necks, low back. These are all things that when we think about our own um, culture and the world that we live in, you hear about chronic low back pain, chronic neck pain, chronic stress being held in certain places. So there are some common signs of personal stress, where we hold that, how that comes out of our bodies. Once we start to recognize where we hold that, you can start to make changes about, I can release that tension. If you know that you hold stress as I do in my shoulders, and I kind of start to hunch a little bit, I kind of start to do this a little bit, as I'm feeling that things are not working well, I'm finding myself maybe having a behavioral, physical, or emotional response to a stressful situation. One of the ways to work with that stressful situation is to consciously make the choice to relax the part of your body where you hold stress the most. And so sometimes for me, that's just about remembering, I need to stretch my neck and relax my back and shoulders. Or you could have something where if you feel like you hold stress in your belly and you're kind of always tense in your abdomen, where you just say, I just got a piece of bad information. I do a quick scan of my body and say, where am I holding stress? I know that I often hold stress in my belly, and I'm going to consciously just extend my belly, relax, and feel the release of that stress. Now, that is not a panacea to make that stress go away. It's a way of opening choice to say, if my body is holding stress here, I can let that go. And I can open up that pathway a little bit. And doing that also allows you sometimes through this habit of releasing physical stress to start thinking about and breaking the patterns of mental stress that you hold that allow you to your conditioned tendency to say, I immediately crunch my shoulders, I immediately develop a posture of I want to fight and move against whatever I have just learned. You also, through relaxing, through opening your physical body, will open the mental space of saying, what's the best way for me to respond in this situation? Where do I need to demonstrate compassion? Where do I need to open choice? What is the urgency of time? How can I make different choices about how I respond by first opening my physical presence and then saying, what are the ways that are going to serve me the best to respond to this acute or chronic form of stress? Now, some of these common signs of personal stress, behavioral, physical, emotional, these are things that we don't even recognize that we're doing, but others recognize that we are doing them. So if you get feedback that, wow, you're really kind of irritable today, I've seen you make some of these mistakes, over and over, you seem kind of tired, are you feeling stressed? Are there things that we can do to help that? Sometimes people on the outside of you are the best barometer for what's going on the inside of you. And so something that encourage that I would encourage you to think about is, are there buddies at work, at home, that you can ask, how am I showing up today? I'm feeling kind of, off. I'm feeling like I'm kind of holding things. I'm kind of anxious today. I'm feeling really frustrated. Are you seeing that? What's your experience of me? Or if you're getting that feedback um, from them directly, it's an easy way to say, where am I holding stress? What's going on in my world? Can I take a step back and say, what's happening and how can I think about and work with that in a different way? One of the main parts about stress and choice is that we don't always recognize when it's happened or it's when it's happening. And I've said that a couple of different times. And I really want to think and settle into that a little bit, that stress coming in is not something that you're always going to be able to deal with in the moment. So there is a heavy dose of reflection that comes with managing stress, and it's a practice over time. And so something that can easily be practiced is to, when you go through a stressful time, whatever that may be, work, family, community, elsewhere, to take the time later to develop a practice of saying, this today, this week, over the last few weeks, where have I really felt stress? Where did I feel like I showed up really well? And where do I feel like I could have shown up better? And what can I do and actively work in that time of reflection, asking your buddies, your colleagues, family members, where did you see me be really great? Where could I have been better? And using those as opportunities to say, what was going on then? How was I responding to the stresses in my environment? And when that happens next time, how can I start to make a different choice about how I respond? Or really leaving open that you did great and you want to establish patterns based on what you are already done. So stress and the response to stress is not always about, oh my God, I didn't do great, I got to make a change. It can very often be about, I did really well in that situation. That was really stressful. I kept space for other people. I was very aware of my surroundings. I was very aware of how I interacted. I want to make sure to do that again. What did I do that caused that to be successful? And asking those questions of yourself and of others and starting to develop conditioned tendencies and patterns and choices around what went really. So I'm curious if you could just jot down on your paper or on your screen, what causes stress in your organization right now? And I want you to think a little bit about all of the external things, people, finances, the world around you, your industry, the weather, the news, all of the different things within your organization. This does not need to be a comprehensive list. List 3 or 4 of those top things that cause stress in your organization. I'd be curious if you could put your top 1 or 2 into chat, just so we can get a sense of what are some of the commonalities, what are some of the things that people see and have in common, and feel free to scan those for yourself as well. One of the things we often find is that regular patterns emerge in organizations where stress is about how we work together, how we manage our time and financial resources, and how we, especially in a nonprofit and mission focused organizations, how do we have the biggest impact we can make? The stress of feeling like you're not serving your mission adequately is often an underlying chronic stress for many, many nonprofits. And then the extension between personal and professional, between you and your organization, is that stress lives in organizational practices and cultures, in organizational condition tendencies, in the same way that it does with your own personal practices and condition tendencies. So, where do you see stress show up in your organization? If you're chronically stressed financially, if you never have enough time, where does that show up? And how do you see that coming to life in your organization? Feel free to jot a few notes about that. Where are you seeing what causes that stress? Where are you seeing it show up? We are chronically overworked. We're chronically overworked because financially we can't hire all the people that would allow us to serve our mission in the most full expression uh, at all times. And that causes stress at the workload level, at the financial level, and at the mission level. And so how does that show up? How do we run effective meetings? Do we hold space and compassion? Do we expect that people are working, crazy hours? When something new or stressful happens, do we just load that on to certain people in the organization, or do certain people in the organization automatically take that on for themselves? A huge part, and I'm going to state something really obvious, is that managing stress for yourself and your organization is about noticing where it is and identifying where it is and why it's there. And we'll talk about that a little bit in a second. But it sounds and seems really simple, but sometimes in our day-to-day lives, especially in the world we live in right now, responding to and reacting is what we are conditioned to do. We see, we react. We engage, we react. Something comes in, we react. That sense of being able to step back, reflect, and make choices is really, really hard to do. But what I'm encouraging you to do here is to do exactly that, to be able to not take a ton of time. This is not about something happens and we have a meeting about it, or we get everybody together, or we all use the Calm app, or whatever that might be. These are little things that you're doing about recognizing this is a point of stress. Are we doing something within our organization that causes it? Are we doing something within our organization that may help to alleviate it? And here are some things to look for, some common signs of organization: the decreasing collaboration, going solo, recognizing that we need to train the next generation or the next series of people within our organization, but boy, is it easier just to do it myself. It would be so much less stressful if I didn't have to include others. It's a very common response to stress, but that decreased collaboration also closes off channels for engagement, for bringing in new thoughts and ideas, and makes decisions for the organization through lost opportunity, just because we're not collaborating, we're not engaging, we're not creating as much time and attention with each other as we could. Lack of prioritization is a huge one within organizations. Lack of role clarity, the fact that I have more than I can ever do in a day or a week or a month. So where do I need to put my time? And there's a list of resources at the end of this presentation. All of them have to do with prioritization and with how to prioritize. Every stress management self-help book will tell you that you need to focus on prioritization and let other things go. So much easier said than done. But if you're going to do one thing professionally that is going to help your organization reduce stress, reduce workload, reduce that sense of overburden, it's prioritization. A huge part of prioritization, as we'll talk about in a minute, is being able to say no to things. What are we saying yes to? What are we saying no to? So I'm not going to go through all of these in the interest of time, but I want to just notice and call your attention to where are you seeing increased conflict? Where are there high gossip and drama that are happening? And where are you finding that we just aren't as happy at work as we used to be? We're not communicating in the way that we used to be. All of these are causes and opportunities for you as a leader to recognize, where does this live in you? Where does this live in your organization? And what are some of the organizational practices that you might be able to change, or augment or add or amplify, that will allow you to make some of the choices and changes to change these things one at a time? Or to pick off something where we say, we're kind of not communicating as well, we're not collaborating, we're not really sure what our priorities and plan and strategies are as an organization. That doesn't mean you need to take on a huge strategic planning process, though Potrero would love to support you in that. What it does mean is maybe it's time to step back and reiterate what's already there. So a practice that I've seen many organizations successfully do is to come to every staff meeting, every weekly meeting, whatever that opportune time might be, and say, let's have a mission moment. Let's recognize what our strategies are. What are the things that we are so focused on as an organization that we want to call them to everybody's attention at the start of the meeting, so that as we think about what it is that we're doing on a daily basis, we are also consistently thinking about, what are our bigger picture strategies? What is our bigger picture purpose? How do we ground ourselves in what we're really trying to do so that we can prioritize effectively as a team? A few more, we've got about maybe 10 more minutes of uh, sharing for you here, and then we'll jump into some questions and answers. Happy to go where you would like the conversation to go at that point. But a couple of things just to point out, and I'm really sorry, but there is no magic solution to managing stress. This is a practice. It's a habit. It's something that, when you put your attention to it and your intention is to change your organizational or personal approach to stress, that's where things start to happen. So noticing in your physical body, in your organization, paying attention to, thinking creatively about, and really saying, there are things that we need to change. How do I find help? How do I engage others? How do I not do things alone? How do I do things as a team? Sometimes leadership is something where it's becomes easy to feel like you need to make the solutions, when really what you need to do is be the first one to open the door, and allow others to come and walk through that with you. There are a couple of common tactics. Again, you read every stress management book, you read all of the resources on one of the following slides. They're all going to have some version of these 5 things. And I want to just touch a little bit on a couple of these. You can obviously see them on the screen, and we'll share this going forward. But leading by example is huge. Organizations, families, communities need somebody to follow. That does not mean you need to have all the answers or have it all figured out. It means you have to be transparent about the questions that you're asking and about the way that you approach things. If something happens in your organization that triggers some stress, a piece of negative, a funding cut, whatever that might be, if you immediately go into panic mode and you immediately feel like the sky is falling, and you communicate that more broadly, it's okay to have those first reactions, but you need to quickly recover and bring other people into the process of saying, okay, this has happened. What can we do about it? Where are the opportunities? What are the responses that we should make? How can this amplify rather than hurt our mission? We just had a bunch of funding cut or restricted or stripped away. How are we going to use that as an opportunity to engage new communities, to engage new funders? It doesn't mean that every situation has a rosy response or is a great opportunity hiding in the weeds. Some are, but not all are. However, as a leader, you leading by an example and looking at that situation as something where the sky is not falling, even if things are really difficult, even if it is really stressful, your response in a positive way, in a way that brings and opens collaboration, that brings and opens possibility, will go a long way towards the people around you seeing and getting swept into that gravity. So as a leader, you create gravity and you need to be intentional about how you do that. The first steps to doing that are to recognize how you feel, where is it living in your body, and intentionally opening that opportunity for choice and for change and for difference. I think trust and communication go very hand in hand. Um, Freely giving the opportunity to earn and recover from trust. Um, Within organizations, people can be afraid to make mistakes. They can be afraid to fail. They can be afraid to screw up and have that negatively impact the organization, their job performance. All of those things are real. All of those things are true. But what is your organizational stance and posture towards failure? Where is it okay? Where is it not okay? How do you work to learn from the times where it's okay? How do you work to avoid, provide support, and provide structure during times where it's not okay to fail or to struggle or to have challenge? All of those things and being clear and transparent about which one you're on will help to build trust. The only way to create that type of an opportunity, that type of interaction, is to really be clear with your communication where when you're clear on communication, on providing feedback, on providing easy access to proactive channels and listening, all of those things will allow you as a leader, again, whatever context that is within that organization, family, or community, to communicate with people in a way that opens possibilities, that encourages people to come in, that brings not only having an open door policy, but actually you stepping through that door and meeting people where they are, as well as them doing the work of coming to where you are through that open door. So the open door is a proactive channel, but it's something you need to step out of to create communication, to lower the overall temperature of things. If it feels in your organization like stepping through your open door policy is a scary thing for people, then you need to take the first step of stepping through that door into a common space. That will also lead to empowerment and autonomy. So giving people responsibility, maybe more than they've earned the credit or the achievement to take on logically. And that's a scary thing that can lead to challenges and failure. What you want to be careful of is that you're doing that in a transparent, learning, adaptive, listening way. So you're not just saying, here's something you don't know how to do, go figure it out. Like that's one response. Saying, this is something you don't yet know how to do. I'm going to help you. Here's a couple of other resources. Let's talk weekly about how this can work. And we're going to move you forward in a way that's structured, that's systematized, but you own it. You have the autonomy and the empowerment to move this forward. And then the final piece I'll just note here is the bottom one, which is a little bit hard to grab onto sometimes, which is just promoting integration. Flexible work options, all of the different things that you do to help your employees, others that you're working with, and yourself feel like they can be human at work. There's a book in the resources channel called Being Human at Work, which is very much about, you might call it work-life balance, which I think is difficult to achieve. There are times when you work a ton, there are times when you live a ton, there are times when you do both, but it's hard to have a balance there. So what it is opening that horizon of time, opening that sense of integration, opening that sense of I can be who I am at work, recognizing the cares and concerns of the context and the situation that you're a part of. Being fully transparently yourself in a professional context is often impossible because your work requires you to be a certain person, to be a certain way, to communicate in a certain way. And that's part of the deal that you sign on for. Same way that you wouldn't be the leader that you are with your kids, with your direct reports or employees, or with your employees and going the other way. You need to be a different type of leader. You need to integrate those things in different ways. So promoting integration, promoting the healthy expression of balance, and doing that in a way that's realistic for your work, for who you are, for what's possible. And recognizing one of the things at Potrero is that we try to give people incredible autonomy over their time, but we also recognize that when we need your time, we need your time. And we're clear about that. We forecast it, and we all work incredibly hard a really lot at sometimes. And then we say, and this is a time where maybe we need to rest and recover and reflect. So having that give and take and promoting that integration is a huge part of what makes your organization special, what makes your leadership special. Calling out that part of it as culture. So the culture of your workplace, the culture of any situation you find yourself in, is essential. The one takeaway on this is that shared loads are easier to carry. So who are you bringing along, and what are you asking of them? Being clear about that, being transparent about that can really reduce the stress that people will feel about not knowing what it is that they're being held accountable to, what it is the organization is trying to do, and what their priorities are, going back to a couple slides to talking about prioritization and the importance of that. So creating shared space, creating a safe environment, creating a cohesive team, and looking at the ways that you foster collaboration and support. And then having a wellness focus, implementing initiatives that promote well-being, personal management, time management, recognizing that people are going to see and need those in different ways. Within the Potrero Group context, we've provided a small amount of money in every paycheck for people to make choices about how they want to do wellness proactively on their end. For some, that's gym membership. For some, it's a yoga class. For some, it's an app. For some, it's the ability to, take a part of a day off to do something in particular. We had people in the past who volunteered in their community, and that was a big part of what it felt like they needed to extend themselves outward from just working in a remote firm on the computer all day long. So creating a shared space and creating psychological, emotional safety are huge pieces of this, as are the structures and the practices from a very operational and logistical sense that help to create the culture that you all work in. Again, sharing those loads is easier than just saying, you do all this, or I, as the leader, carry all of this forward. One thing that I want to call out before we jump slides here is just the idea of psychological and emotional safety. Really difficult to do. I don't want to downplay or underplay how hard it is to create a situation in which people feel like it's okay to speak up and take risks without fear of consequence. The number one way that people do that is by saying, this is a place where you can say anything and take risks without fear of consequence. But there's no follow-up to say, what does that exactly look like? The leader doesn't do that. It's not a habit or a practice in the organization of taking risks and reflecting on what those might be and on what we learned from that. So recognizing that to create safety and to create the opportunity to learn and be a learning organization is really something that you need to do at multiple times in small ways over a long horizon of time, so that people see a continual pattern that it's okay to do these things. And it starts with you as the leader doing that, being transparent about what worked and what didn't work, what you learned, and then asking the basic question of yourself in whatever context that is, whether that's a team meeting or in another context, to say, this didn't work as well. What did you see happen? What was the experience that you had as staff being a part of something? What did you learn? How can we do something shared, and creating that shared learning space? Doesn't have to take a long time, doesn't have to be every time, but developing that practice and developing that culture of it's okay to not have everything go well, because we have a shared space where we learn from that. If we make the same mistakes over and over and over again, that's the type of organizational failure. If we make the same mistakes better every time we make them, until eventually they're either gone away and we don't think about them anymore, or the level at which we're talking about them is so nuanced that it's become a practice and a habit, organizationally to pay attention to those things. And that's really what you're shooting for, are those small tweaks over time that become habits. And that's what creates culture writ large. And then I want to make sure to leave you with at least one, really simple thing to do. And that's if many people do this root cause analysis is a way of looking at things that happen, whether they be disasters or successes, to figure out really what happened and why did it happen. Something that I use a lot in my work and that I recommend with a lot of our clients is a practice called the 5 whys. And that's for something that happens, you ask why 5 times. You could ask it 10 times and still get great answers. But start with 5 and ask yourself and or your team, or even in the context of a client meeting, are we feeling stressed? Is there something that's impacting us? And repeat that why 5 times. Why are we stressed? Well, why that? Why so many of that? Why this? Why is that happening? And do that 5 levels and bring the strongest sense of personal and team creativity that you can, because your why response might be different than somebody else in the room at that point. And so what you're looking for are those collected groups of why. That can be written down on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on a computer, but you're trying to document those whys and then looking for what are the threads that connect them together? What are the things that you can take action on? You're not the fifth why is not always the most important one. Sometimes it's the first, second, or third, where you say, I don't have enough time because I have too many tasks. I don't know what's important. Everything's important. Well, why is everything important? Because we really don't know what to say no to, which is kind of the same as saying we don't know what our priorities are. We don't know what we're being held accountable to. And so when you get down to some of those nuggets, you then say, okay, so how do we address that? If we don't know what's most important, is that because we haven't read the strategic plan, or because we don't have one, or because actually it's just a binder that lives on a shelf and we don't really interact with it that much? If everything feels important, then maybe I need to work with my team to really help them understand it's okay to say no. Maybe we use something as simple as like the 4-part Eisenhower matrix, which you can go Google after this, and we'll put it in the follow-up, which basically just is a way of categorizing importance. And then you focus on certain things, not to the detriment of others. Maybe you're giving other things away, maybe you're pushing them down, but you have a realistic sense of what our priorities are, what our horizons of time are, and the incredible way that understanding what exactly it is that we're being held accountable to, that I'm trying to do as a leader, creates a sense of shared scope and mission. It creates a shared sense of carrying the load, and can reduce stress in ways that it doesn't matter what's coming in from the outside, because how we're dealing with it from the inside is protecting us, taking in that information, putting it in its proper context, and dealing with it when we can and when we have time. 100% easier said than done. But again, practice over time will help you understand and your organization understand, how do we deal with things that come in? Are we responding? When is that the muscle we need to use? When do we say, you know what, we're going to put this over here and decide how to deal with it as it happens? One thing that this doesn't do is really help you change the reality within which you work. Funding cuts, overwork, staffing, political realities and changes, all of those different things are still going to be there. So everything that we're talking about today is your response to those things and how do you manage those. Um, One of the things that is kind of within Potrero's culture, and I would encourage you to think about how this lives in your culture, is how do you have fun? Is it something where you have to remind yourself to celebrate successes? You have to remind yourself that actually we're doing really cool stuff for people that we care about, or places that we care about, or communities that we're engaged in. And that's good work to be doing. If it's not fun, how do we make it more fun? Now, that doesn't mean that everything is fun, but it means that there's an undercurrent where sometimes it has to be lighthearted. There has to be humor. There has to be people engaging because they care about each other and they want to be there together. So if that's a missing element of what it is that you're doing, I'd encourage you to read the book and think about, how do we have fun? grab a car, move it around a little bit. If you don't know the comic strip Ballard Street by Jerry Van Ermegen, it is amazing. I don't think it's in print anymore, but check it out. Um, and then just to remember as we wrap up here, that stress is normal. And when you are under stress as a person, as an organization, as a team, to first and foremost acknowledge it. If you have the ability to slow down, prioritize, think about how we work together and share the load, communicate the realities that you're feeling, positive and negative, where you're struggling, where it feels like you can take things and run with them. And finally, as a practice for all of us, is to give grace. Give each other space and time and understanding, and recognizing that 99% of the people that you interact with on a daily basis are doing the best job they can with the resources that they have, with the training that they're provided, as much as possible. Everybody needs to rest. Everybody needs to reflect. Everybody has bad days. That giving people the grace to really recognize that I'm under stress, but boy, I'm trying my best as an organization, as a team, and as an individual. So with that, here are a few resources. You'll recognize some of these from, I'm sure, reading and work that you have done. I focused a little bit more on the kind of books and bigger drops into this. If you go to Stanford Social Innovation Review, Forbes, LinkedIn, there are a billion things that we'll talk about: stress, time management, all of these different things. These are some of my favorites, some of the ones that we recommend regularly. Um, I can't come out of this opportunity without recommending Don't Lead Alone by Potrero's founder and our managing director, Cleveland Justice, and Daniel Student. That's a great thing that's not on stress management, but it's about how do you incorporate a lot of these different practices into the work that you do. Of all of these, boy, my personal favorite is 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals, by Oliver Burkeman, who's a Brit. The audiobook is amazing because the accents are so great. However, that book really puts a lot of stress management in the context of time. Daniel Pink's book, Win, also does that, The Secrets of Perfect Timing. To be perfectly honest, you'll probably never schedule an afternoon meeting after reading those two books. Because of the way that it impacts us physiologically, the way that it impacts the stress of the outcomes of those meetings at the end of the day. There's a lot of different things like that that are great little nuggets. I will also put in a small plug for what is called the Best Idea Club. Best Idea Book Club, which is a subscription service that Potrero and I are totally unaffiliated with, but it gives a lot of short snippets, like the 5 best ideas from every book that comes out. It's just an amazing deep resource. I think it's about $100 a year, and that's another thing that I should have put on this list, but gives you great ideas, quick snippets and takeaways in about 10 or 15 minutes from books that are coming out too rapidly and too quickly to be able to, in any way summarize and connect with all of them. So I'm going to leave this here. Don't feel you need to write this down. We'll follow up with you. And as we wrap up, I just want to remind everybody that these webinars are something that Potrero Group does monthly. Our next one will be August 27th, right before the holiday weekend. Same time, same Wednesday afternoon channel. Cleve Justice is going to host that. He's Potrero Group's founder and CEO, and it's going to be around boards. Building boards for today and tomorrow, really looking at, it's kind of a board clinic, examining boards from through a new lens or through a variety of different lenses, really looking at identifying change needs in your board, common things, as well as organizations that are represented on the call, specifically unearthing new skills, new experiences, and looking at driving organizational growth, extracting and imbuing boards with new levels of experience and talent. How do you become a place and become a board that people want to be a part of, that they're disappointed when they are rolling off of or termed out from? And so there are things that boards can do to attract talent from a diverse perspective, from a specific role and experience perspective. And there are ways to start thinking about how your board evolves, what you need as an organization, how you attract that and retain that talent. And so that's what Potrero will be talking about on August 27th. It's also a line of practice for us around board development, board recruitment, and really the work that we do ties together from boards through executives to teams to strategic planning to how organizations operate and solve problems together. So we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into boards in about a month's time.